Hello, I'm Bob Kaplan, professor at the Harvard Business School. I'm pleased to be able to talk to you about supply chain carbon accounting. Historically, suppliers have been chosen by factors such as price, quality, performance of their products, and delivery. But now, because of the challenge of climate change, companies are becoming accountable also for the carbon emissions that its suppliers produce. Increasingly, it looks on the horizon, Europe and the United States might impose border taxes called CBAMs on the carbon content of imported goods. So the challenge for companies like BMW, Airbus, or Apple, or higher, they have thousands and thousands of suppliers. And each of those suppliers has hundreds and thousands of suppliers, all the way down to companies extracting minerals and hydrocarbons from the earth or growing crops on small farms and plantations. And the problem is, how can you possibly measure all the carbon that's being produced in the components that companies like BMW, Airbus, and Apple are purchasing? Well, it turns out there's a simple and elegant solution to this, which my colleague Karthik Ramana at Oxford developed, which we call the e-liability carbon accounting method. And this method looks at the problem not from the point of the downstream company, but from the companies that first extract materials from the earth or grow crops on farms and plantations. For example, take a mining company. When it produces a ton of iron ore, copper, or nickel, it needs to just calculate all the emissions that are produced in that production and assign it per ton of that output material. And then when an ocean barge transports those minerals to the next customer in the supply chain, the ocean barge will add its emissions, diesel fuel, to all the products that were on board. And then when the next customer, say a steel company, receives the raw materials, it already knows all the carbon that has been emitted in order to produce and transport those minerals to its factory. And then the steel company, through its own production process, basic oxygen furnace, will produce more emissions, which it adds and allocates out to its output products. So we now would have the total supply emissions of carbon per ton of steel produced. And we just keep repeating this algorithm as all the products move down the supply chain, eventually becoming embedded in a BMW car, an Airbus plane, or an Apple iPhone. And with this elegant method, each company in the supply chain gets information only from its immediate suppliers, adds its own emissions, and assigns the total of the purchased and produced emissions to its output products, which it then passes on to its immediate customers. One of the advantages is that emissions are measured once and only once at the point where they occur, and they can be audited at that point as well, with the audit reports passed downstream. As a specific example, and we're now working with dozens of companies around the world. We worked with GT Tire, a global tire company based in Indonesia, and the company asked its suppliers of the 4 largest volume materials in a tire, which is steel, carbon blacks, synthetic polymers, and natural rubber, for the carbon content of those inputs, which it was purchasing. And then it added its own emissions per passenger tire, and it could then show the data to BMW, one of its largest customers. BMW, under pressure to measure the emissions in its supply chain, was really attracted to this idea and asked GT to do the same analysis for the specific factory in China that was supplying them with tires for one of its highest volume car products. And so GT Tire brought together in its Chinese plant, all the production personnel, but it also brought in its key suppliers and trained them in the e-liability method. And together, they were able to apply this method to measure the carbon content of the tires produced in the Chinese factory, which were then subsequently shipped to BMW. So in summary, supply chain carbon accounting is a new capability that supply chain managers must master. We have a method now to do this in an accurate, verifiable way that is relatively easy to implement. And we'd be happy to collaborate with any of the companies represented at this conference that wants to learn more about this innovative and practical approach and help them apply it at their companies and with their suppliers. Thank you very much.